Welcome to Talk About It Tuesdays with Joe. This is my good friend Danny Rone.
Hi.
He is my first guest.
Woo! Woo!
So today we're going to be talking about body image and body dysmorphia, how it happens to both men and women, and all kinds of things that are relevant to us. And we're going to speak from our own perspectives because that's all I can speak to. So body dysmorphia, what is it? So body dysmorphia is when, to dumb it down and not give you a textbook definition, it's when you look in the mirror and you see something that isn't really you. So for instance, myself, I have it. I used to be very overweight, and I am no longer very overweight, but when I look in the mirror, I still see a very overweight human being. It tends to make us really overcritical of ourselves, to analyze what we're doing, what part of us, like, for me, it's neurotic. And there are parts where I'm like, I don't like how that skin folds there. And like, when I move this way, that's really unattractive. And things like that.
Yeah.
Which most people that saw me would not be like, oh, look at his skin fold right there.
Right.
So it's not logical in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
It's literally emotional, mental things that you see that aren't necessarily there.
Totally. It's a distortion.
Yes. Yeah. It's like viewing life through a funhouse mirror lens.
In a lot of ways, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's crazy. So how does body dysmorphia affect you?
I guess I notice it in subtle ways. So I work with a trainer right now, and I really enjoy working with her. She's super body positive and focused. But something I've actually been really struggling with that she's been trying to be really motivating around is actually taking pictures of my body. So I started working with her in April of this year, and I definitely have seen my body change in really great ways. I've learned a lot about my body from the process, how long the process takes, and she's been actually really encouraging me to take photos along the way to kind of see how my body is transforming. And I've been really, really uncomfortable with that idea. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that she's been super great about is she said, nobody else is going to see these images. I don't even need to see them. You keep them for yourself. You don't have to post them or anything. And for me, I think that I'm still uncomfortable with that idea because I know that it's going to live inside my phone. And even though I know I'm not going to send them to her or post them anywhere, I still really feel hesitant to do it because for me it's uncomfortable. And I think the reason it's uncomfortable is because the reason I'm working with a trainer, one, is to be healthier, but then two, to make my body look more like I want it to look. Mm-hmm. And I think I have more in my mind posting images when my body looks the way that I want it to look rather than the process that it took to get there. And I know that my body looks and feels better than it did when I started with her. Again, I feel healthier. But again, I still am really struggling psychologically with even this idea of taking a picture for myself that maybe I will only ever see. So that's something right now that I kind of notice, is my kind of relationship with body dysmorphia, where even when I know that maybe I'm the only one who sees these photos, I'm still resistant to the idea. Because it's anxiety provoking, it's uncomfortable, and I'm judging myself, even though I know that nobody else is probably going to see it. So that's something more recently I've noticed.
Yeah, so I can totally identify with that. I've done plenty of programs where they're like, take a before picture, take before measurements, and I'm like, yeah. Can I do it 3 weeks in?
Yeah.
So that I don't have to see how large I actually am or see that number, because what if it is what I think it is? Totally. What if it's as terrifying as I really think? And sometimes it is, which is awful for me psychologically. But it's really interesting because, again, it's just for you. Nobody else is going to see it. It's your body. We the fact that we feel so disassociated with our own bodies that we're disgusted by the idea of seeing ourselves like that or knowing what it looks like or looking back at it. It's wild.
It is. Even thinking about that more, I definitely have noticed too, even subtle things like, in my bathroom, like the mirror is right next to the shower. And so, I'll kind of set up like the towel ready to go for me. So that way when I move that curtain, like I'm covering my body, right? Before I even look in the mirror. Because there's something about that I feel kind of that internal shame kind of manifesting, even in that way. Um, what's so interesting though is that I find that for me, like, getting ready in the morning, I'm not as hyper focused like on my body, but what's interesting is the idea of adding a picture to it, like capturing it in a different way when I live in this body 24/7. There's something different about that. This idea that like maybe it will go somewhere else, even though my body comes with me wherever I go. But at least I know when I'm wearing clothes that it's covered, and like only I know what it looks like unless somebody else has seen it and commented on it. So that for me is kind of the added element, whether it's like the mirror seeing it, or like taking a photo of it, it's captured in a different way. Feels like I almost have to hide it.
Yeah, so you had mentioned something like somebody's commented on it.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of pick up that and kind of run with that conversation and go with like, where does body dysmorphia come from? Like, how does it start? Why do we get such wildly untrue opinions of our own body? And sometimes they can be true. Like when I was heavy and I thought I was heavy and people told me I wasn't heavy, that fucked up my perception of my body too. So it's really important to kind of be honest with yourself too, and not only be like, no, it's all body dysmorphia. At least to me,
Right.
like there's something called toxic positivity. I'm gonna say that again. Toxic positivity.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm like, what positivity? So there's such a thing as toxic positivity, and I think that there's also like a healthy amount of awareness of your body,
Yep.
and then taking it way too far into the extreme.
Right.
So body dysmorphia starts in a couple different ways. It can start through your childhood and traumas, or people who are talking to you in your childhood. So for a lot of people, it comes from their parents or grandparents or family members that they're with a lot, that comment on their weight, that comment on the food that they're eating or the amount that they're eating. For me, it was a multitude of things. So I definitely had family members commenting on my weight when I would gain weight, or when I was little and definitely a chunker. I would, if I gained a significant amount of weight at any point, like I was compared to my grandmother who was obese, and things like that definitely stuck with me. But also like the amount of food I ate was commented on, how I ate was commented on. So it got to the point where I eat really, really quickly because people would comment and make fun of how I ate. And that wasn't just family at that point. Like in middle school, in the cafeteria, people would make fun of like how I ate, what it sounded like when I ate, all those stupid things. And middle schoolers are evil.
Horrible.
So it stuck with me to the point like where I wolfed down food. And I actually choked in the cafeteria once in middle school, and a teacher had to jump over a table and give me the Heimlich.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, I went home that day.
Okay.
I was mortified, and they were like, well, you're fine to go back. And I was like, call my mother. Get me out of here.
Yeah.
So little fatty Joey definitely went home. A nickname that somebody gave me was Joey Beef Burrito.
Oh, God.
Which somewhat rhymed with my last name, but it was because I was fat, and it like made fun of my last name. I would have gone with Joey I'm a Rhino, because my last name is Amarino.
Better.
If you're going to be punny, do it right.
Right.
But yeah, so for me, it definitely came a lot from that. And then, it's wild and weird being a gay man too, when it comes to body dysmorphia and body image, because a lot of my idols as a kid were women and pop stars who looked amazing, and then like the guys in their videos that also looked amazing.
Yes.
And then I looked down and I was like, what's this? So for me, body dysmorphia didn't only come from like all the things with my family and my childhood, but that definitely influenced a huge portion of it. But like my image of like what thin should look like was distorted because I was looking at thin women and expecting my body to taper in that same way, even if I got thin, and it was never going to happen because that's not my bone structure.
Right.
And that's a part of it too, right? So
Right.
no matter how much weight you lose, not everybody has the same shape.
Right.
So some people might be very tall and willowy and thin, but look healthy and fine, and they are healthy and fine. And then for me, I hit a certain weight and I looked like I was dying.
Yep.
My face was sunken in, but my stomach still wasn't like and cinched.
Right. No, and I think too, I think an issue that often comes up, right, that we've, talked about before is representations in the media. But then also, like, beyond that, I think, and maybe we can circle back to that, but, people thinking that they can replicate what one person is doing and then are sourly disappointed if, like, if the same thing doesn't work out for them. Kind of to your point, like, every body is different. These programs are marketed in such a way where they're very cookie cutter. It's like every person can go through this program, and there's always the disclaimer that results may vary, but like that's true, right? I mean, and they probably will, because what one person is doing isn't necessarily going to work for another person. One thing I've kind of learned through this process is I actually was not eating enough.
Mm-hmm.
So like to this point of like body image, something that we've talked about and that will often come up is this idea that I need to restrict my eating in terms of losing weight and to gain the body that I want. In actuality, like through this process, I learned that I was actually under eating very unintentionally. And in eating more, I've actually been seeing more results.
Mm-hmm.
So I think kind of within that, going back to the media piece, I think it's also that education piece that's so tied into it. In terms of knowing what to eat, when to eat it, and even quantities. Because again, I think, the media has really led us to believe that you need to eat less in order to have a slimmer, lesser body. But in actuality, I've learned through this process, as I think I'd heard along the way too, I actually needed to eat more. And that was very counterintuitive. My body actually rejected that initially because it wasn't accustomed to eating more. And then it got accustomed to it. And then the opposite results were happening. And that was so surprising.
Mm-hmm.
My brain almost couldn't compute what my body was saying. Yes, like you're finally eating what your body actually needs to be eating. So that was a really kind of interesting realization for me in this process. And I think something that still is like a missing element in a lot of things you see kind of in the media.
So you were talking about eating more
Yeah.
for your body.
Yep.
And eating more for your body, you learned through your trainer, correct?
Yeah.
Like you were working with somebody. So it's not necessarily something that you can just find on the internet and find what's right for you. There are websites and apps that ask you questions about your body and how you eat and things like that, and will cater more towards you, which I think is really cool. But obviously, speaking one-on-one with a human being is going to give you your best result.
Yeah.
In terms of like what you need to eat, how you eat, what your base metabolism rate is, things like that.
Right.
And not everybody's is the same. So mine is low. According to every electronic device that I like hold or stand on or anything that evaluates like through little electric impulses,
Yeah.
my base metabolism is really low. Like I need 14 to 1500 calories a day. And for me, that's hard because I love to eat.
Yeah.
I like all the food. So it's really hard for me to restrict to that point because that's not a lot. It sounds like a lot, especially if you were anorexic in the past, but it's really not that much. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how I was anorexic. I was anorexic if you didn't get the hand raise. And I would eat less than 600 calories a day.
Wow.
And I don't know how I did it because I would literally eat a protein bar and a can of tuna. And that was it. All day.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, I want to eat everything again.
Yeah.
Like, I can't go back to that. I also had exercise bulimia. So there's multiple forms of bulimia. There's the standard, like, binge purge where you eat a lot and then vomit. But purging can also be done through exercise, and it can be done through laxatives. So I tried that one. Didn't really work for me. The laxative route was not, like, it didn't work.
Okay.
And it doesn't work for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It just fucks up your whole body. So I stopped that and I just started working out 6 hours a day. which is not healthy. Working out to an extreme is definitely not healthy. And then restricting your eating while working out to an extreme is not healthy. But then I went from that to just anorexia because I got to a place where I lived and I didn't have a gym and I couldn't find it. Like, there was nothing. I lived in the middle of nowhere. So I just went to completely restricting what I was allowing myself to eat, and eating like literally a protein bar and a can of tuna a day.
Wow.
And if I ate anything with my tuna, it was either salt and pepper or a little bit of salsa.
Right. Well, and I think we're kind of hitting on like an important point too, kind of within a lot of different things that we're saying. The word that kind of comes up for me is access, right? So like not only access to knowledge, like I, am in a place in life where I feel privileged to be able to work alongside a trainer. But I also work to kind of manifest being able to do that. But even beyond that, like access to like reasonable nutrition or access to grocery stores that afford a variety of healthy options rather than just like very densely packed food of really unhealthy stuff. Or even just access to knowledge. Like, I think we take for granted regularly that we're able to access so many things now via technology, but also backing up to say, well, what if somebody doesn't have the access to the technology to look up that information? Or like you said, like knowledge of apps or websites to use. Like if the person isn't really aware of that, are they going to take the steps to find it? Or like even money, right? It's like that I think is an important thing to discuss too, because I think we actually spend a lot of time talking about the cost to be healthy, right? But there's also a cost associated with being unhealthy.
Being unhealthy is very expensive.
It is expensive.
The problem for a lot of people that don't have health insurance is it's not expensive until it's too late.
Right.
So when you can't afford to go to the doctor, or you feel that you can't afford to go to the doctor, you might be extremely unhealthy, but you're not spending any money on it because you're not going to the doctor.
Right.
Because you can't pay for it, which in turn makes things worse typically.
Right.
So there is that cost, but the cost of eating healthy can be high, especially where people are so anti-GMOs, if it's not organic, don't eat it, everything like that.
Right.
Like, yeah, you know what? That's great if you can afford that lifestyle. I try to eat as many organic things as I can, especially anything with a skin that I eat. So like organic apples or organic tomatoes, things like that, because it's, permeable. But if you can't afford organic, just get the damn vegetable.
Eat it.
Just eat it.
Right.
Because that's still better for you than the processed food in the middle of the grocery store.
Totally.
So that rule or that thing, I don't know even where I heard it, but it's like, go around the outside of the grocery store and that's where all the necessary healthy things that you need are, and anything in the middle is just junk or extra. Is really, really true. Like, if you go around the outside of a grocery store, every grocery store's outer ring will have all their meats, it has all their dairy, and it has all their produce. Everything else that's in the middle is processed foods, pastas, everything like that. And if you like grains and quinoa or pasta, that's great. That's fine to supplement. But when you go up and down every aisle, that's when you have the real ability to buy all the things you don't want to eat. Which then, if you have body dysmorphia or body image issues and you eat those things, you hate yourself and feel guilty, and it starts a really weird, awful cycle. So for me, like, some people have great self-control, right? So I was just telling Danny this a few minutes ago, but I bought 2 pints of ice cream earlier this week, and I was like, I'm going to keep those in the freezer and just have a little bit every day so that I can sate my sweet tooth, because I fucking love sweets. And I ate the first entire pint that first day. I started eating just a little bit throughout the day, and then like 4 hours later I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna eat the whole thing. It's only 800 calories. I just won't eat any other food today, and that'll be fine, which is also not healthy. I still ate other food, because who was I kidding? But then 2 days later I started with the same thing with the other one, and then I just ate the whole thing yesterday. So for me, I have no self-control, and I can't have those things in the house, because if I have them and I know they're there, I will eat them. One of my biggest complaints I used to get from my mom is if we had ice cream and it was in the freezer, she never got to eat any. And I'd be like, it was there for a week. What more do you want from me?
Right.
Like, I left it alone for an entire week.
Right.
Which is really hard for me. I also used to scrape just the surface and leave a really even layer so you would not be able to tell when I ate as much ice cream as I was eating.
I think this is actually, this is bringing up something that I was just kind of thinking about too. And maybe you found this to be true, but I feel that an element to body image also entails things being done in secret.
Yes.
I think that's a really important element to kind of discuss with this. It's not necessarily always true, but I often find that it's often true, right? Where like there's this tendency to kind of lean in a direction of satisfying that urge, that desire, but doing so in a way where you're kind of minimizing the appearance of it. You know, I often think of too, like even my own experience, like grazing in a way. So like for me, like it might not be sweet, but it would be salty things. So put popcorn or a bag of chips in front of me, devoured. So like grazing, like kind of over time, like progressively reaching into the bag, pulling out some chips, closing the bag, putting it away, and then going somewhere to eat that. But then the bowl's empty. So then going back and like filling that again, progressively kind of taking a layer off the ice cream. There's almost this layer of secretism, you know. If we're going in the more like clinical, you know, purging kind of direction, you know, that's done in the bathroom and the door is probably closed and that's probably locked as well. So there's kind of this element of like things being done behind closed doors in secret. You know that it's happening, but maybe somebody else doesn't. And if other people are around, you're trying to minimize the appearance that it's happening. Because it's, again, I kind of relate it back to even my image of, like, for me, like, with the photographs. Like, even knowing that the photograph is mine, it's knowing that it lives now on my phone rather than just beneath my clothes.
Yeah. So it's shame. There's a lot of shame associated with it.
Yep.
For me, when I would do that, it'd be like in the middle of the night or when nobody was home. So like I'd be eating the ice cream in the middle of the night. I still eat in the middle of the night sometimes. Sometimes it's the only way I can get back to sleep, which is wild. My brain is wild. Mm-hmm. I would eat the tuna when I would get home from work. I was working an insane amount of hours at a gas station, and I would eat my one protein bar there that I would buy there. And then at night, I would get home and I would eat a can of tuna in secret, in the middle of the dark, in the kitchen. I wouldn't even turn a fucking light on.
Right.
And just like, all right. It was tuna. Like, there's barely any calories in tuna. There's no fat. Like, it's not enough to sustain a human being.
Right.
And I would still be like, oh my God, I'm eating. People can't see me eat. Like, it was psychotic.
Yeah.
Not really, but like, it was really, really crazy for me. Like, it got to a point where I was so neurotic about it and so shamed that I just like try not to ever let anybody see me eat, which is hard, especially now, now that I eat again.
Right.
But it was a wild time because even then I was like, oh my God, I'm still eating too much. I should cut down. I should only eat half a protein bar. Like it's insidious. It digs into you.
It does.
And like worms its way through your brain and affects every aspect of your life.
Right.
So the other thing that we wanted to talk about, or I wanted to bring up too, is how it affects not just women.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been talking about our own perspectives and we are men.
Right.
But it's not just gay men and women that it affects. It also affects plenty of straight men. And as the years go by and the media is geared more evenly towards men and women, it probably is affecting straight men more so than it did 10 years ago, because the push for not just gay men to have really amazing bodies and be ripped, but the push for men in general to look like that has become more and more and more present in the media.
Right.
So it's not just women. Like, you're not alone, ladies. And it's not just gay men that are with you. Like, your boyfriends, your husbands, your sons, anybody you know could be suffering from this, and a lot of people don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. If they do, it's in a really self-derogatory way or a self-deprecating joke. Like, oh, I'm so fat. Oh, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't have another. Like, oh, you know, I don't want to go to lunch because my cheat day was 3 days ago. Things like that.
Yeah.
Which is me. I say that all the time. Like, if I had a cheat day, I can't go to lunch with somebody because I, again, can't control myself, and I will order something that's not super healthy. Or if I do, I'll be like craving something that I know is there at that restaurant.
Right.
And sneaking 700 fries off of somebody else's plate is eating 700 fries.
Right. No, and I think I think I'm glad this point is coming up because, you know, I think something to think about is I think when we think of somebody who might be living with these sorts of issues, right? Certain images might come to mind, you know, especially when you're talking about like the extremes. So like if you're talking about, you know, clinical anorexia, there's probably certain images that come to mind. If you think about obesity, there's probably certain images that come to mind. But in reference to kind of body dysmorphia and how this affects so many different people, I think something also that I've noticed is I find that people, and including myself, I've certainly done this, but like there's almost a resistance to kind of accept that somebody that looks in this very ideal way also may live with these same issues.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, somebody might think or feel or even say out loud, well, how could this person have issues related to body image when they have a six-pack?
Mm-hmm.
But that is contributing to the problem by having those thoughts and feelings. They're all valid because they're yours, but at the same time, to not humor and even go as far to accept the idea that somebody who maybe has this ideal image in your mind of what an ideal image is, that they also could have issues related to body image. If we can't accept that, then I think in a lot of ways we're really kind of perpetuating the culture that we're really trying to like combat and not be a part of by resisting the idea that somebody can look in this very ideal way and then us reject the idea that they also don't maybe have issues related to body image, whether men or women.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When I got, you know, really thin, people would come and be like, oh my God, you're so skinny. You've never had an issue. You can eat whatever you want. And it's like, no, I can't. It took
If only you knew.
a lot of work to get this fucking thin, and I'm holding on by a thread. Like, and I've caught myself doing that to people. So I'm not perfect. I will be the first person to tell you. No, thank you.
Okay.
I'll be the first person to admit that I'm not perfect. So I've done that to people, and I've been like, oh my God, you're in such amazing shape, whatever, you can eat those chicken wings, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And it's not really fair of me to do that because I don't know, unless I do know them. If I know their struggle or their lack thereof, then I don't feel as bad saying that because I definitely have friends that can eat whatever they want and not gain an ounce.
Right.
And I
hate them.
Hate them. Not really. I love them dearly. And then for some of them, that's the opposite issue, right? So there are people who can't gain weight and either want to or need to.
Yeah.
So it's not just for fat people. Like, body dysmorphia is not only for people who feel they're too heavy. There are also people who are really, really thin and have been made fun of and been called like string bean and beanpole and all kinds of things and told that they look like they're dying. And they can't gain weight. They can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way street. Just like fat shaming, there is skinny shaming. And it's not okay to do. And I don't know why some of our first things to do, like when somebody of a certain weight makes us mad, people in general tend to be like, oh, that fat bitch, or oh, that skinny bitch.
Yeah.
Like, why is that the defining thing about the bitch?
Correct. Correct. No, you're right. Weight.
Yeah,
right.
Like, that's it. Like, we go for where it hurts.
Yeah.
Because we're all sensitive about it. So it's really interesting to me that, like, we talk about it so much when it comes to being overweight, but not as much when it comes to being underweight.
Yeah.
Because that's a reality for a lot of people too. And it's not a beautiful one. Like, feeling inadequate doesn't feel good no matter which side of the inadequate spectrum you feel like you're on.
You touched on this before, and I'm curious to kind of just get your thoughts on it. I know you and I have talked about it before, but I think it might be helpful as to, you know, gay identified men. You mentioned, you know, the LGBTQ plus population before in terms of this issue. How have you seen this kind of manifest itself within that community?
It's awful.
It is.
So there's a thing. there's a thing, and I have commented on it with my friends, and like I've seen memes about it now, which is great because I'm not the only person that has felt this way.
Yep.
Which a lot of times we aren't. We think we're the only one, and we're not. But like, there's a thing called straight skinny and gay fat, and it's a real place for gay men. Like, women will tell you, "Oh my God, you're so thin. You're in shape. You look great. You're amazing." But in the gay community, you're fat. Like,
Yeah.
you're not the ideal body shape.
Yep.
You have no visible abdominal muscles, and so therefore you are fat. And you're not necessarily fat enough to fit into a subset that is attractive to certain people. So, like, bears typically are a little overweight or very overweight. Like, it depends. They're just big, hairy men, and they have their entire own culture within gay culture, and they're celebrated, and they celebrate each other and themselves. But sometimes you're not there, and sometimes you're not here. So you're not a twink, which is a very
Right.
skinny, hairless gay man or straight man. Like, you can be straight and still be a twink. But you're not a bear.
Right.
So now we have an otter.
Yep.
We just keep pulling animals in.
We do.
But typically otters, like ideal otters, still have kind of a six-pack. They're just furry instead of hairless. So it's really wild in the gay community. Body image is insane. When I was heavy and I was younger, so when I was 18, I could go to the club in New Hampshire. And I would go, it's called the 313 or the 313, whatever you wanted to call it. And I would go and I would dance and I would have a blast. And I dance like a hooker, and it's just how I dance, and I can't help it, and it's never
He
going to
doesn't.
change.
He just dances amazingly. That's what he means to
Like
say.
a prostitute. Amazingly
I
like a
wouldn't say that,
prostitute.
no.
I dance like my rent is 3
Is
months behind
due.
and the eviction notice is on the door. Like Britney Spears and Cardi B when she was a stripper had a baby. So that's how I dance. And it's fine. And it's fun, and I love it, and I live in the moment, and it's great. But people wouldn't dance with me when I was heavier. They'd comment, their friends would come up and be like, "You're so good, oh my God, I can't believe it, blah, blah, blah." But they would never flirt with me. And then I'd have guys that would come up to me and literally tell me, you know, "You're cute enough to fuck, but you're too fat to date."
Wow.
And not just one guy, multiple guys, same words, over and over and over again. And that really messed with my self-esteem and my body image, because I was like, okay, I'm not worthy of being in a relationship or dating because I'm fat. I'm good enough to sleep with. I'm great to be friends with. But nobody's going to love me until I'm thin.
Yeah.
That sucked. So shame on us, gay community.
Well, I think that's what we've talked about before too. Like, just in terms of like, our community will often preach like language of inclusivity, and being inclusive and welcoming, and then there's clearly these examples where it's not every gay person that falls within this category or perpetuates this like, just hateful culture. But also it doesn't align at all with the culture that we often are seen right up alongside and representing. I know Grindr is not the pinnacle example whatsoever. And for those unfamiliar with Grindr, it is a hookup app, but you can use it to also... It's really just a tool to meet people, mostly for hooking up, but also I know plenty of people, and I've used it this way too, to go on dates with people, to just chat with people, but by design, that's what it's about. And, it's mostly, like faceless, headless bodies, like just bodies represented.
Just torsos.
That's it. Bare minimum information, but often what is included in that information is really hurtful, offensive, not inclusive language. I've, definitely used the app and definitely have seen certain profiles say things like no blacks, no femmes, no fatties to this point. They're just putting that right on their profile. So you see a six-pack and you see hateful language. And you're seeing that, and if you're within any of those categories, immediately you feel ostracized, you feel disenfranchised, you feel shame, and not worthy. I like that you use that word, because that's definitely something that I've experienced too in relation to my body. And that's definitely what I felt on that app in those kind of moments where it's like, I don't feel worthy of even messaging this person. But then over time, becoming more confident within myself, I've said, I don't even want to talk to this person because if that's the culture that they're going to create, that's not something I want to be in a relationship with at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no. No fats, no femmes, no fatties, no blacks, no Asians.
Yep.
Like, it's a thing. And it's usually in that order.
Yes.
Like, just... And they're like, it's a preference.
Yep.
I just don't like them. That's... Hating everybody or disliking everybody who fits into that category is no longer a preference.
Right.
A preference is, I don't really like this flavor of ice cream.
Yep.
But people aren't flavors. Like, somebody's skin tone, somebody's body weight and everything is not a flavor. And yes, you absolutely can be more drawn to a certain one. And that's what it is.
Yep.
But to exclude everybody else just because of one aspect of what they have or what they don't have is really disheartening and disgusting when you think about it.
It is.
And it's not always that individual's fault. So, I'm not playing devil's advocate in this, but what I'm saying is, like, we're programmed by the media to find certain things attractive. And if you speak to anybody who is a person of color, they will absolutely tell you it's true. Because when you look at media, most of the representation for somebody who's classically attractive is a white person.
Yep.
They're a white man, they're a white woman. If in media somebody is being portrayed as a person of color that is attractive, it's stereotypically a woman because women of different ethnicities have often been fetishized. So black women have always have been fetishized in the past, but black men have been looked at as like all different kinds of negative things. Not that people appreciate black women to the point that a human being should be appreciated,
yeah.
But again, they've been fetishized. Same thing with Asian women. Oh my God, they're exotic, they're this. Or Latina women, like all of these things. But then men of that same culture have also been talked about in a supremely negative way.
Yep.
So it's really interesting to me that things like that happen because that affects self-esteem and self-worth too, especially if you identify with that. So imagine if you're a person of color or a different ethnicity and you're also heavier or too thin and you have body dysmorphia. Like, where do you go from there?
Right. And you're on Grindr.
Yeah.
So,
and you're on Grindr.
Right.
So you might as well.
Right.
Just not.
Right. Well, and that I think is... Because the other thing, too, that I think about is every single... That profile was built by the person. They constructed it. So every single line and every single image that they put on that was a choice. So I'm constantly wondering, why did you choose to write what you did? Because each of those no was another choice that the person made against another body of people, and just like subset of people that person has deemed less than.
Privilege.
Exactly.
It's privilege. And so, like, not white privilege versus this privilege, but, like, there's a certain amount of privilege. People have talked about it on their talk shows. Like, Tyra Banks went out in a fat suit when she was on a talk show. I think Ricki Lake did way back in the 90s, too. Like, people have done it where they've worn fat suits and they've gone out and seen how people treat them differently. And people do. People 100% treat classically attractive, fit people way better than they do fat people or people that are considered unattractive.
Yeah.
So, like, cute girls can get away with tickets or, like, not getting tickets and pulled over by the cops sometimes. Yeah. They can get free things at the restaurant or things like that. People will, like, sneak them a little something extra sometimes. And it happens with cute men, too. And I'm not going to say I've never done it. When I worked in restaurants or as a bartender, like, it's just what happens, and it's not an acceptable thing, and it's not a good thing, but it happens.
Right.
A lot of times because you're trying to flirt. So you're like, hey,
right,
here's this little thingy. It's a free dessert on me. But it's not good to do things like that, but it happens all the time. So it's privilege. And if you have it, you don't know you have it, which is the thing about privilege that's inherently shitty. Because a lot of times people don't realize they're privileged because when you've lived a privileged life, you don't know.
Yep.
If you've always been white, you don't know what it's like to not be white. If you've always been thin and attractive, you don't know what it's like to be fat. If you've always been fat, you idolize what it might be like to be thin and attractive, but you still don't necessarily know what it's like. So we don't know what we don't know. So when you're overweight and you want to be thin because you see how well they're treated, how well people who are ideally like classically beautiful or whatever the shape of the decade is, because it goes through phases, right? Like dad bod was a thing that people were really, really into in the past couple of years.
Yep.
Which, again, was great for straight men, did not translate into the gay community, really.
No.
What I also find interesting, which I talked to Danny about the other night on the phone, is gay men will find a straight man of a certain type attractive, but not that same body type attractive if the person's gay. So like dad bod, for example. I know plenty of gay men that were like, oh my god, so-and-so has dad bod, he's so hot, blah, blah, blah. But it was happened to be a straight actor. Like when Chris Pratt was heavier, or I think Leonardo DiCaprio was one of the guys that had like dad bod and it was all over the tabloids. But there's at least 30 people at the club with the exact same body type and they would not look twice. Or speak to them, or flirt with them, or make out with them, whatever is going to happen. Like, not twice, but a straight man that has it, there's that allure of, like, capture that happens there, too. So that's really, really bizarre. Another way that eating disorders manifest, or another reason why they manifest, is sometimes people feel a lack of control in their lives. As a hairstylist, this also comes into my industry a lot, because when people feel a lack of control in their life, they change their hair. And I talk to people about that behind the chair all the time because they don't necessarily know why they want a dramatic change. Like something happened and they're just like, I just need a change. I'm going to change my hair. And it's not that they need a change and they just want their hair to suddenly be different or suddenly be way shorter. It's they feel like they can't control the situation that they aren't comfortable with or don't like, or whatever's happening at home, or a breakup. Breakup haircuts are a real thing. You learn once to ask about it before you do another. Because when somebody starts bawling in your chair because they cut all their hair off and that they left their long hair, you can't fucking put it back.
No.
So it's really, like, I like to bring that up because A, psychology has a huge influence on me and has always been really interesting, but B, I want people to understand maybe why they're doing what they're doing so we can make an appropriate choice. Like, is this the right decision? Should we make all your blonde hair jet black? Probably not is the answer to that, because you're going to hate it. But like it manifests in other ways, like not just controlling your hair, but controlling what you put into your body. So I've known people who are anorexic, and that was the reason why, is like their parents were very controlling. It manifested for them in their teenage years. And they felt like they had no control over their lives, or what they could and couldn't do, what they were allowed and not allowed to do. They were in all kinds of sports. They did all kinds of things. Their lives were very, very regimented, and they didn't feel like they had a choice in what they were doing or not. So they made the choice to eat or not. Or they made the choice to binge and purge.
Right.
Because of that lack of choice. And then some of them, it was that and shame. So not just the lack of choices in their life and what they were made to do, but I had a friend who was a figure skater, and her mother always told her how fat she was. So not only was she in a regimented program and had no choice with a lot of things in her life, but she was also constantly reminded by her mother that she wasn't a size 00.
She wasn't enough.
Yeah. And it's really painful, and a lot of times we manifest that, especially when it has to do with something like your mother calling you fat all the time, through eating disorders. So she developed bulimia.
Right.
So a lot of it has to do with control, because there are a lot of things we can't control in life, right?
Right.
And when you feel like you can't control anything, what are the things that you can control?
Well, I think what's interesting about that, because like I agree a lot, even kind of shifting away from even my own personal experience, but like I've had the opportunity to work with some clients who definitely have lived with body image related issues or disordered patterns of eating. And it does often come back to trauma, something traumatic that happened within their past. And again, control as well. What I find really interesting about that in relation to what we were kind of talking about before is I remember you kind of mentioning how for you, sometimes you feel out of control when you're like eating certain things, like having, again, access to like multiple pints of ice cream or something, just like almost feeling disinhibited in a way. So I think that's kind of the irony of body image that I 100% agree, because there is a lot of control that's involved. Like, you have the choice to control what you're feeding your body or what you're not, or when you purge or things like that. But also, the irony of it is the person is out of control in a way. And so it's this awful dichotomy where one minute you're feeling in control of your body, but at the same time, your body feels completely out of your control and not looking the way that you want it to. There's a client that I work with who, when you look at her, she truly appears to be a skeleton. I mean, she unfortunately has lived a life of living alongside anorexia. And it's to the point where her body just rejects the food. It's not even that she is forcing herself to not have that food in her body. Her body has kept the score and has remembered the trauma and now is almost controlling her. And so that kind of gets back to like what I was saying before about like this irony of it so being about control, but yet there comes a point where it's just completely out of control. It's a really hard space to exist in, alongside shame, alongside guilt, alongside kind of these other identities of being in the LGBTQ plus community, being a woman, being a person of color, all of that kind of compounded. And of course the person's going to feel out of control.
Yeah. And then on top of all that, you have people fucking commenting on it. So I'm sure with being as thin as she is, people probably all the time are like, oh my God, are you okay? Oh my God, eat a sandwich. Oh my God, she needs a hamburger.
Yeah.
All of those things that we say to people who look skeletally thin. And it's rude. And it's not our business. Like there's a difference between being concerned for somebody's health and safety and just saying something rude to say something rude. So if you're truly concerned for somebody's safety, you're not going to go up and be like, oh my God, eat a cheeseburger.
Right.
You're probably going to get to know them first and then be like, is there anything I can do? Like, how can I help? Or anything like that. You're not going to be like, oh my God, you need a sandwich?
Right.
Because again, it's rude and it's assuming something too. It's always really pissed me off because when I was really fat, people would be like, you should put the fork down. And all kinds of things like that. Like, say unnecessary comments to me about being overweight. And then I got really thin, and people literally were like, you need a sandwich. You don't look good. You look like you're dying. Like, telling somebody they look like they're dying is not going to get them to stop if they do have an eating disorder. Because we don't see it. We are like, I could be a little skinnier. Like, my cheekbones could pop even more. But there's a way to show that you're concerned that's healthier, that may or may not be received. The other thing is you don't have control over it. So if it's for somebody else, you can't stop me from being anorexic. You can't stop me from binging and purging. There's nothing you can do. You can absolutely express concern, and just so we're clear, I'm not doing either of those things. I'm just putting this in personal perspective. But like, there's nothing you can do to stop me from doing it. You can make me aware that you're aware, and that might make me want to reach out for help. But it's just like addiction. Like, you can't force somebody to get clean until they're ready to come clean or to deal with their issues. So don't comment on somebody's weight unless they ask you.
Yep.
Like, don't offer somebody a sandwich or tell somebody they're really thin or too fat or anything unless they fucking ask.
Right.
Because if they don't ask you, they're probably aware. People that are fat know they're fat. People that are skinny know they're really skinny. Like, you're not telling them anything new. So unless they ask you, like, do I look fat in this? Do I look fat? Do I look like I've gained weight? Don't just throw it out there. Do answer honestly in a kind way if people ask, because that's one of the things that drove me absolutely crazy was when I would talk to people and I would ask and be like, oh my God, do I look like I've gained weight? Am I fat? Like, am I fat? And people would be like, no, Joe, no, you're fine. You're fine just the way you are. You're normal. You're fine. And then I lost all my weight and people were like, oh my God, you look amazing. You look so good. You're so skinny. I can't believe it. And I literally, like, being me, I was like, why didn't you tell me? I asked you and you didn't tell me. Why wouldn't you just tell me when I asked if I was fat that I was fat? And people would be like, oh, I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
Right.
You don't think this hurts? Like, you
Right.
don't think me finding out you lied to me hurts my feelings?
Right.
Like, I asked you for help, and you literally were like, no, you're fine.
Right.
Like, don't lie.
Right. And I think, too, off of that as well, like, I think it's a balance, right? Because I completely agree. Like, who really wants to be lied to? Who wants to be deceived? At the same time, I think we can all agree that that is probably a hard conversation to have,
Yes.
right? So striking the balance between somebody because the other thing, too, within that as well is, like, talking about body image, even if the person is soliciting that response and looking for that kind of, like, outward validation that they look okay, there's maybe that still internal feeling, right, that they're lying even if they're not, or like, oh, I'm actually this other kind of version, you're just not kind of saying that. So I think it's the balance between, like, having open and honest conversations, but also being, as you said, like, kind and, like, compassionate with that information, because just to kind of come out and answer that, I think might be really awkward, and for some people, or not really know, ooh, how exactly do I have this conversation?
My friends that are watching this, like my personal friends that are watching this, are probably like, Joe's not good at that. So if you know me, and you've ever asked me, you've learned, don't ask me if you don't want an honest answer.
Right.
Or if you want me to lie to you, tell me first. So there's a difference between asking because you just want to be validated, right? Like, oh my God, do I look fat in this? And it's because you just want to hear, no, you look good.
Right.
And that's all you want to hear. And then there's a time where you're asked, do I look fat in this? Because you're like, oh my God, do I look fat in this? Like, does this look good or not? My friends have learned, I'm sure, over time, and I typically tell people after the first incidents, don't ask me if you don't want me to tell you. Because of what I went through, I will be honest.
Right.
And it's not to hurt anyone's feelings.
Right.
But it's because I'm not going to be the one to lie to you.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to be the person that I was disappointed in.
Right.
So don't ask. And again, if you want me to lie, just tell me first. Be like,
Right.
lie to me. Does this look amazing? And I'll be like, the best.
And I think, too, this is a great point, because, like, what you're referring to, which I think is helpful for people watching this to see, is it really starts with knowing your audience. So, like you said, the friends of mine who are watching know me. So that kind of goes back to what we were kind of talking about with, like, workout programs in the media, thinking that it's this cookie cutter kind of thing. So, like, that's a great strategy for Joe, but maybe that's not the best strategy for Cindy or Bob or John or whomever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really, again, kind of going back to what we, like, started with, I think knowing your audience is so important, because what's going to work for one person isn't necessarily going to be comfortable for somebody else. So being open and honest, but in such a way that's kind and compassionate, and that's also aware of the person you're talking to. Because to think that somebody else won't react differently, I think is kind of misguided and mistaken, I think. So, and again, too, it's kind of bringing us back to what we were talking about, which is, like, every body is different. And so what works for one isn't going to necessarily work for another. So really, at the end of the day, knowing your audience, knowing your person, is so important, aside from the information kind of being talked about.
Yeah. Another thing that we wanted to touch upon is that it doesn't go away. No matter what you end up looking like with your workout program or not. Like, I'm currently doing a program and was doing an eating program until all those pints of ice cream. But I'm back on track today, and that's what counts. But doing those things, like being part of a program, doing it, no matter, like, if my biceps get bigger, I don't necessarily notice, unless somebody says something. So if I look good, let me know. But it doesn't go away. Like, no matter how fit I get, if I end up with a 4-pack or a 6-pack and abs and pecs that I've always desired because I've never had pecs, I probably will still be like, oh my God, they're not big enough. Oh my God, it's not good enough. Like, it doesn't go away. You don't grow out of body dysmorphia. It doesn't change. You can get better and cope differently with it and cope better. I feel like as I've gotten older, I've gotten to the point where I don't have the energy to put myself through some of the things I put myself through. Like working out for 6 hours a day or not eating. Like, I just don't have time or energy for that. I can't do it, which is good. because now I don't, those aren't viable options for me. But like,
Right.
that doesn't mean the temptation is gone. I cannot tell you how many times I think, like, oh my God, if I could just be anorexic again for like a week or two, how amazing would that be? Like, that's not healthy,
No.
but it's part of being someone with body dysmorphia and being somebody with previous eating disorders. Like, you can't get rid of it. All you can do is cope with it and talk yourself out of it and be self aware. I find being self aware is really, really important in situations like this. So, like, is this a healthy thought? Yes, I feel that way right now, but am I actually going to gain 13 pounds because I ate 1 pint of ice cream? Hopefully not.
Right.
Like, all of these things, like, is this true? Asking yourself if something is true can really make you evaluate. Our minds are really, really interesting, but if you're listening to something, if you're telling yourself something, because our minds are a computer program essentially, like, it's electrical impulses, and whatever you tell yourself is what your mind believes. Like, you're programming yourself. So if we keep telling ourselves, oh my God, I'm fat, oh my God, this is going to make me so fat, oh my God, we're going to believe it. Whether or not it's true, it's a belief that you will hold. But if you analyze that thought and that pattern and you're like, but is this true? Am I going to get super fat because I ate 1 pint of ice cream? Is this the end of the world? Most of the time, you can be like, no. And it can give you a little bit of that control that we sometimes lack. Um, that's how I cope. It's not going to be that way for everybody. It's not going to work for everybody. That cognitive behavioral therapy, like that moment of like really looking at and analyzing what I'm putting myself through and thinking about, can help. It occasionally helps with my anxiety, but not really, because the anxious mind is not logical.
Right, and I think you're kind of bringing up. It was kind of like making me think of a couple of different things as well. So, body image is kind of a lifelong relationship. I would say it definitely can be a lifelong struggle. That's not to say that you're doomed. You're never gonna get over it. You're stuck with this kind of thing for life, because your relationship with your body can change if you allow it to.
For those of us with really issues with eating sweets and like feeling so negative, track all the good things, the healthy things you ate that day, and remind yourself, like, yeah, I had some ice cream, but I also ate this many, like, all these vegetables, all this fruit, like, all of these healthy things.
Yep.
And that was the majority of what I ate.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I ate this, but I also put a lot of healthy fuel into my body.
Right.
And that's something to be celebrated too.
Yep.
It's not going to change your body dysmorphia or how you feel when you look in the mirror, but it's good to acknowledge the positive things that are actually positive. I wish I had more coping mechanisms for people, but I don't.
I would definitely say too. We talked about this, and I don't think it readily comes to mind, but I think we agreed it was so important. Is just having conversations about it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was a big part of you even creating this series, where it's kind of identifying that we weren't talking about a topic enough, or relating it to your personal kind of passions. So having conversations with people about body image, again, body image and our relationship with it, again, when it's more dysmorphic and negative, again, it's often done in secret.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing it kind of forward with people that you trust in safe environments is, I think, a really helpful strategy to kind of take it out of that dark place, and again, putting it in a place where it is more regularly conversed about, and something that's just more readily accepted as, hey, like, I'm struggling with this thing, or I want to talk about this thing, and then you talk about it.
Absolutely. Talking, like, that's why Talk About It Tuesday with Joe exists, because we need to talk about these things. We need to help other people identify with that they're not alone. Like, This is not an individual issue for anybody. Anxiety is not. All these mental health issues that I'm going to be speaking about as this goes on are not things that only one person has ever dealt with. You're not alone. There are other people who are going through it, who are feeling it, who've been there, and if we don't talk about it, nobody knows that.
No.
Like, you're gonna feel alone if people don't speak about it. So that's why I'm choosing to do this. A, because I find it fascinating and I'm very passionate about it, but B, because I don't want people to feel alone anymore. I'm really sick of it. I'm over the fact that people feel isolated and that they're the only one and that they're a freak or they're crazy or anything like that, because you're not. You've got your shit, and so does everybody else. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. If anybody can prove that to us, it is my personal goddess Britney Spears. Like, on the surface, looked like she should have had everything, right? Like the money, the fame, all those things, everything we've all aspired for because it's what we're told is the dream. And her life has not been a cakewalk, and it will never be a cakewalk. She's got her issues, she's got her demons, and she made it through 2007, so we can make it through whatever the hell we're
Yes,
going
we
through.
can.
And I'm going to leave it on that. So thank you for watching our beautiful, beautiful episode. Thank you, Danny, for coming
Thanks for having me.
spending some time. If you didn't notice, I have light now. So
Yes, he does.
there's that. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Leave a comment if there's anything else you'd like to see, any topics you'd like to hear about, if you want this schmuck back. And yeah, thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.